Hi, do you have a moment to talk about rats?
So whenever you attempt it, you end up with something that's a bastardization of spirituality.
Its existence can 100% be explained by science, whether or not we have the technology.
It's like if you're looking at some object and someone's like, well, that's a sphere, and another person's like, that's a cube, and then they start shooting each other.
They should be under the impression that they can't hide this stuff from God, yet they do it anyway. The great thing about science is we know almost nothing.
Yeah. And actually, because of science, we know that we know almost nothing. Maybe one day we'll discover God. I don't know.
All right. Welcome to another kitchen sink microscopy. I'm Casey Rochford, and we would really love it if you would like and share this video and subscribe to the channel because, well, that's what awesome people do. So,
Yeah, and you're awesome. We're all awesome, actually. I'm Eric Rosenblatt, and don't forget that we write our own music. So, stick around to the end of the episode, and you'll hear something completely new. Our music's available on iTunes and Spotify, and if you're feeling adventurous, go to ksmvidcast.com and check out our website. So, Casey, what would you like to talk about today?
oh, the usual, something that'll get people all pissed off.
Politics?
No, actually, right, religion. I was thinking.
Yeah.
I wanted to go over the philosophical false dichotomy that often people make this misconception, that science and religion can't play well together.
Yeah.
I for one think that they can absolutely go hand in hand, but there's some people that are just like one way or the other.
Yeah, if you, I guess there's kind of this for both sides, science and religion. There tends to be this kind of inherent aggressive posture against the other when there really doesn't have to be. Classically, a lot of scientists were religious, and even people who looked at evolution and stuff like that, they believed in that and believed in God at the same time. So I don't think that the two are completely at odds with each other, but many people do, apparently.
Yeah, like namely, like young Earth creationists, for example, very much ignorant of science, and they look for any way that they can twist words around in their texts to explain how old things are, and uh, there's just an endless amount of weird things that they come up with for like why the dinosaurs died out and that we coexisted with the dinosaurs, which is patently false.
Well, yeah. I mean, I guess maybe a particular religion could be um, unable to cohabitate with certain matters of science. But I think spirituality in general, the idea of there being like this greater being or the force or something out there, I think is completely compatible with science. I mean, the more I dig into the deeper things, the more spiritual I feel. I don't know if that It's kind of a thing, but
Yeah,
um,
it's like obviously I'm a scientist, so I'm a little biased towards science, I suppose, and I'm an atheist, so I'm a little biased against religion, I guess. But um,
yeah,
I I do actually feel that there's room for religion because it provides people with uh, a sense of satisfaction in what they don't know. Um, you
yeah,
know,
yeah.
it's like there's like this blanket cosmic explanation for everything that they don't understand. Oh, God just did it that way. God works in mysterious ways. Blah blah blah. Whatever.
Mhm.
But I think people hold on too tight to that when science comes along and says, "Hey, the Earth is round," and "Hey, the Earth is really really old," and, stuff like that. And then people say, but the texts, the ancient texts, they say something different. And I'm just like, shouldn't the point of your religion be about the spirituality more than the geology? you know?
Yeah, yeah, or the timeline or something.
Yeah, like I don't know that it's a historically accurate text, but it could be spiritually accurate, you know?
Sure, sure. I mean, it is written by humans talking about the human condition. So for sure, you're dealing with timeless uh, issues that people have always dealt with, and so I think that's a huge value in religion is that it kind of allows people to make sense of the world around them a bit and get together and work together and get along and stuff like that. I think those are good things. Um, but oh, you brought up like quite a few points there actually. But as far as like the like all the minutia and all the details and stuff, I kind of take issue with that because it's like, well, first off, I mean, you can talk about almost any religion. Well, actually, any religion. The ancient texts, unless you're talking Scientology, have been written a long time ago by people, written down by people. They're not written by gods. So people are prone to error and miscommunication and things like that. So I think it's completely acceptable to reanalyze your religion from time to time. I think Judaism does that often, actually. Um,
Yeah.
there's a lot of discussion about the meaning of things and kind of updating.
Yeah,
I,
that's the cool thing about Judaism is all the discussion. Like, our friend Caleb, he's like, you know, he and his father both are actually like kind of world-renowned scholars in their religion. It's
mm,
just, I think we've both been in his library, and it's just kind of a massive amount of books. You know,
yeah, yeah, exactly.
like I find that pretty cool. Like even if I don't, um, subscribe to that way of thinking, uh, I definitely have a lot of respect for the amount of effort put into all that knowledge. And it's not like it's all in all that you can't have science with religion, because I think even one of the popes or something came out and said, you know what, evolution makes sense scientifically. There's absolutely no reason that God couldn't have used that as his mechanism for creating us, in the long term.
Sure. Yeah. The thing is, science and religion shouldn't be at odds with each other. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I think it
Yeah.
does everybody a disservice if that's the case. I think, like anything, science constantly challenges and reevaluates its own self and its own data and changes with the times. And I think religion should do the same thing. Like, because it is kind of talking about cosmic forces and beings and the human condition. It's very human centric, most religions. So, yeah, in fact, I think that would be awesome to have like a sciencey religion.
Well, actually, it was a friend of mine that started like a legitimate, like government recognized religion called Religion of Arts, Theater, and Science.
Hmm.
I believe RATS is the acronym. Uh,
That's a rather unfortunate
yeah,
acronym.
yeah. I don't know how the marketing's going to go on that. Hi, do you have a moment to talk about rats? uh,
Oh.
but I I'll say it's kind of a cool idea to um, play the game, politically as far as religions go, and um, all the bending of the rules that they're afforded by the liberal interpretation of the First Amendment. But when I looked at the statement of beliefs, which I'm guessing is probably like a requirement for being recognized by the government as a religion.
Yeah, probably.
There was a lot of like hyper focused stuff, just kind of like you can tell it's like a personal agenda that somebody is like slipping in there, and that rubbed me the wrong way because it's like that's just what every other religion has done. Like I think it would be better to like approach that in more of like a peer reviewed way, like
Yeah.
and no, well, to be fair, to some degree, he did do that. Like I gave some suggestions, and he took them under advisement and made a few adjustments here and there and stuff on the wording. But all in all, it still felt weird.
Yeah. Well, and that is one of the problems with religion, I think, is that it tries to codify kind of a very nebulous philosophical position in a very hard way. And I think that you can't do that. So whenever you attempt it, you end up with something that's a bastardization of spirituality, where and I see this with, and not to talk too critically of Catholicism, but it does tend to be kind of like that, like very methodical. There's these rituals and specific things you have to do, and I think, why? How does that doesn't make any sense? Like that's not how a god would work. That's not how the universe works. Like, you know, so I my own, I'm an atheist as well. I consider myself an atheist agnostic because I do believe in whoops the force, something out there, some kind of something. I don't know. I mean, I can feel it sometimes. There's a mystical something or other out there. I just can't put my finger on it. But yeah, I think that anytime you try to turn something into a structure like that, something unstructured and just amorphous, like a spirituality, and you try to turn it into a structure, you end up with corrupt interpretations and control, and things become, I think it's harmful. I don't know. I don't know if that's making any sense. Honestly, I'm a
Yeah,
little bit tired, so sorry.
yeah. There's certainly harmful aspects to religion. Um, I mean, you could make the argument that there's harmful aspects to science when it gets misused and stuff like that. So,
Well, actually, that's a good point. In both cases, in the case of religion and in science, and well, we could go as far as like politics and other cultural structures. Um, it's kind of like there's the status quo, and you can't question it. This is the way it is. The information, whatever it might be, is settled, and don't rock the boat. And that does happen in science and religion both. And I think it's good to challenge things and question things and kind of be the I guess the rogue.
Yeah, like when science is used properly, like the scientific method and everything, and peer review and all that stuff, and most importantly, the understanding that you don't know everything, you
Yeah,
probably never will.
exactly.
Um, when all of that is done correctly, it's like this lawful, neutral sort of situation. Like science is just it's there for good, really, but it's not, you know, necessarily built to do one thing or the other. It's not built to do good or evil. You know, it's
No, science is a process.
yeah.
It's an algorithm.
But
Um,
but when you get into the really structured stuff, like, you know, religions, especially Catholicism, or, you know, things like that that are on the stricter side of, you know, all the rigmarole, and, you know, like politics as well. Like I view the United States Constitution uh, very much like the Bible in the reverence it's given, the inability to really affect much change on it. Like, I think it's too hard to change it, because here's the thing: if you make it easy to change, you can always easily change it back if something's not working. You know, but
true.
you know, like the, you know, the Bible never gets updated or anything, and you know, why is that? Like, why did the author go silent? You know, it's like,
Well, that's a good point. And not to, well, I could totally go into my whole like God as an alien tangent, but I'm going to avoid that for right now. Um, yeah, that's a really good point. Like in politics or governmental structures, you were mentioning the Constitution. There are means of making changes. There's an inbuilt system to update it, though difficult, which maybe it should be, like, you know, like you said. But in religions, a lot of religions, that doesn't happen. You know, in Christianity, I grew up as a Christian, so I'm intimately aware of that. It's like you are not supposed to change the word of God. Um,
yeah.
and
Somewhere like a badge of honor, like Islam is very proud of never changing anything ever.
yeah, well,
uh,
and that goes back to like Judaism that does tend to kind of critically analyze its own doctrine from time to time,
mm,
and that's, I got to give them props for that, at least, because you know we don't know anything. I mean, that's the whole point of being an atheist or agnostic. You know, you don't know either way. We're always exploring and learning things, and it's maybe one day we'll discover God. I don't know. Uh,
well, yeah, actually, I was going to bring that up. Like, I'm, you know, on the atheist agnostic spectrum, like a 6 out of 7. You know, I'm like pretty damn sure that there is no God, just because of, you know, the way we all generally interpret God, just really loosely, is supernatural. And
yeah,
uh, you know, everything that we see and feel and experience is demonstrated to be in accordance with natural law. And so I think that if there is a God, its existence can 100% be explained by science. Whether or not we have the technology and know enough about how the universe works to explain it now, you know, like if God showed up now, maybe we can't explain it yet, you know. But
yeah,
all I'm saying is, like, there will be some scientific explanation for all the stuff that he or she may or may
sure.
not be able to do.
Yeah, exactly. Like science would be able to analyze God or whatever, and come to some kind of conclusion as to what's going on there. and you get into weird stuff like quantum physics, and uh, you know, I think it's evident that things aren't as we used to think they are. So maybe and that's where I think it's like it's good to leave the door open for possibilities like that. On both sides. Like if you're an atheist or somebody who's like a diehard atheist, like says, "Oh, there is no God," absolutely. I think you should keep an open mind. And as somebody who's religious, like keep an open mind. Maybe the way I look at it, something that kind of I've thought over the years. In fact, it's actually something that kind of led me to atheism, is the idea that all religious doctrines are sort of just a different perspective of the same thing, like different people's interpretations of some weird, crazy stuff they couldn't explain. And so, you get these different interpretations, and yeah, the stories sound completely different, but they're actually talking about exactly the same sort of thing. And it really troubles me that people will kill each other over the different interpretations of something. It's like if you're looking at some object and someone's like, "Well, that's a sphere," and another person's like, "That's a cube," and then they start shooting each other because they can't agree on it. Like, no, it's this weird, strange shape that from one side looks like a sphere and from the other looks like a cube, and it's okay because that's just the way it is. And so,
Yeah,
yeah.
I came to it by a pretty similar fashion. I also had that sort of idea, like, oh, hey, maybe all these religions are basically, just the way we have different languages to
Hmm.
say, different words for the same concept. Basically, is different religions for the same factual event or something. That's kind of where I landed as like a teenager, like a preteens maybe.
Hmm.
But then I don't know, probably around 20-ish years ago, I was reading this book about Atlantis, and it started talking about how all all over the world you have uh, stories of a great flood that floods the entire earth.
Hmm.
And it talked about how uh, that's like not really plausible scientifically, but um, and I don't remember how they tied this into Atlantis. Maybe they thought Atlantis got flooded or something, but
It was a spaceship.
yeah, that's besides the point. Though, what got me thinking was that this book went on to explain that all of these great flood stories don't happen anywhere near the same chronological time, and so it basically explained, like, if you're you know prehistoric or early history man, the world is not very populous, and you don't you don't have a jet to jump on and go see the world. Your world is very small, and
Yeah.
still actually looks pretty big. For everything you can see, like, it goes on for miles and miles, and there's probably nothing out there. And so when you see a flood in your vicinity, you look around and it's miles and miles and miles. Oh, it must be the whole world. That's basically like that got me thinking about perspective and how we don't see the whole picture, but we fill it in with presumptions. And I think that's a lot of what religion is we see something and we can't explain it, so we ascribe it to God.
Well, yeah, and that's kind of an easy answer in that regard. Not that it's impossible, but I think it is kind of the lazy way to explain things.
Mhm.
Um, but no, you're right. Like the the flood thing, like people back a long time ago, they could only see a few miles away. Like we didn't have satellite imaging as far as we know. Um, you know, hundreds of thousands of years ago or tens of thousands of years ago. So we don't even know, and yeah, if a flood happens somewhere, people, it covers thousands of miles, then people think it's the whole world. And yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know. I thought that was really interesting, and I think it really sparked a new way of thinking for me, which ultimately led to science eventually. But it I think it's really important for people to come to those realizations, and it's not like you have to abandon your religion, but it's okay to look at it in a different light. Like, okay, maybe these are just stories, and it's allegorical, and you know, um, I
Well,
mean, I
yeah,
mean,
yeah. I guess that's a good point. That people feel like if they analyze just a little bit of the other side, like they're gonna flip all the way and lose everything. You don't have to abandon everything. Look, I'm an atheist, and I'm still very spiritual, and I very much respect Christianity. Like, I have my original Bible from when I was a little kid, and I respect that. Um, but I look at it in a deeper, more complex way now, and I look at it from the standpoint of these are stories possibly about something unexplained, that the people of the time had no way to define through the language that they had. And maybe it's God, maybe it's aliens, maybe it was just some weird thing that happened, uh, but we don't know. And I think it's fantastic, all of the crazy stuff that was born out of those early days. I definitely don't want to downplay the good that religion has done. I mean, people talk constantly about all the bad, the crusades and all this stuff, and killing and murders and massive wars and stuff, but it does good. All in all, I think there's some positive benefit, societal benefit to religion, especially in the early days. Maybe now we've reached a point where we can, maybe we don't need that anymore. Maybe not. I don't know.
I
Um,
yeah, I mean, I tend to think that we've, as a species, kind of outgrown the need for religion, but um, I mean, there's plenty of things we don't need anymore, and we keep them around because we want them or like them, or
yeah.
it just makes
Yeah.
us cozy or whatever. But
But nobody needs to do oil painting or something, but you watch one episode of The Joy of Painting with Bob Ross, and you're like, oh my God, this is awesome. You know?
nobody
So
needs 60 packs of toilet paper. But
exactly. But I think the good thing about religion is that it inspires people to be selfless and do things they would not otherwise do. You look at like natural disasters, and who's there before the Red Cross? Churches, um, helping people and doing things. Um, so that's good. But it can definitely go down a dark route. And I
Mhm.
think that's a whole idea that what you believe, your faith, your doctrine of choice is all there is, and everything else is heathenism or something or whatever. And I think that's harmful. I think it's good to explore things and question what you believe, and don't abandon stuff because there's good ideas in there. Yeah, the Bible has some good stuff. as far
Like,
as when it
yeah,
comes to like talking about how people should interact other than stoning people for stupid shit. But as far as like getting along and um, not being aggressive and stuff, that's good stuff.
yeah. That's one thing I wonder about though, and I guess this doesn't have so much to do with the interaction between science and religion, but uh, the difference between the good parts of religion and humanism, where like you mentioned, stoning people to death for being gay,
Mm-hmm.
being a thing that's in the Bible. Um, why isn't that being written out in light of our new understanding as a society that everyone's human, we should all be treated equally, we're all made equally, all that stuff. Why can't they apply even a gentle scientific method to
Yeah.
their thinking, to their ideology, and say, hey, you know what, maybe we interpreted it wrong, maybe the person who interpreted God misheard. Maybe God had a donut in his mouth.
That's the amazing atheist talking about Haiti. Oh man, wow, I forgot about that.
But I mean, like, why not, ease up on the Catholic priests and say, hey, you know what? Maybe you go out and have sex. Maybe you go out and get married, because what you're doing now is turning y'all into pedophiles.
Well, that's a good point. That your uh, the system is shutting down a natural human biological function
Yeah,
for
I,
the
I,
sake of doctrine, and it's causing harm.
yeah, I refuse to believe that the explanation for the sheer amount of pedophiles in the priesthood it comes from pedophiles seeking out priesthood. Like, I think these people are genuinely good, normal, well-adjusted people that go into priesthood, and after a few years or several years, they start to miss, like
Well,
certain carnal, like natural tendencies.
or yeah, miss them, or if you've never had them, you're still gonna have that desire because it's biological.
Yeah,
So yeah,
and it's funny, like they should be under the impression that they can't hide this stuff from God, yet they do it anyway.
yeah, that's a
which,
good
which
point.
makes you think, how much conviction do these priests have in what they're telling you?
Yeah, that's
Just
it's
something
a,
to chew on, but
yeah, definitely chewing. Yeah. Mm.
but yeah,
Mm.
it's I don't know. Like, I think I debated many years ago a young Earth creationist, and it was frustrating to say the least. Like that was, you know kind of like the anti-vaxxer interview, but maybe a little less hardcore. It didn't keep going back and forth so much, but his name was Spike Saris, Psarris. I think he's all over YouTube. Actually, I think he's kind of well known in the creationist realm. So
Mm.
you can look up some of his videos probably, and just see the kind of ideas that he's putting out there. He's like an engineer, but he talks with great confidence about astrophysics and geology and things that maybe he knows some things about, but he doesn't necessarily have a formal education in. Uh,
Mm.
and I was trying to debate with him during one of his presentations at my community college. It was just astounding that, like, you could clearly tell this guy was pretty intelligent, and my physics teacher hosted him, and he was also a really brilliant guy that just happened to think the Earth is 6,000 years old. Like, it's you know we got to be careful not to be too black and white about it. We can't just look at a religious person who lacks some scientific critical thinking skills in one particular avenue and cast them off as complete idiots that are beyond help, you know.
That's true. Yeah, because I, there are a lot of people I know, in fact, who are religious, who are very much immersed in the fields of science. Um, but I think that's one of the differences between religion and science, major religions and science, is that science is flexible. It's always changing. It's always the well, the methodology yields this. Like you simply adjust to new information. And I think religion is often not looking for new information and is resistant to it,
Mhm.
um, until there's no possible way to deny it. Um, and I mean that's perfectly fine on an individual basis, but when you have a, a system where there's authority and control of people, especially when it's intertwined with the government, you have things like the Pope, who has a lot of power across the world,
Yeah, even
and
over
that
Christianity.
yeah, and I think that's where there could be harm. There's no harm in being ignorant. Everybody, you and I are both ignorant of like 99% of everything in the universe. We don't know everything
Well,
nearly at all.
not always harmless, but
Yeah, yeah, but I mean, it in general, it's harmless. But when you have control over people, things change a little bit, and I think um, that's the point where I start to have a problem with it, especially when somebody is commanding people to go kill a bunch of somebody else's because they think differently.
mm.
Um, and both are as ignorant as each other. So, you know,
You know, I find myself wondering, you know, why why haven't there been more prophets writing the word of God, you know, in the
hmm,
last couple thousand years? Like if somebody turned up today and went to the church and said, uh, God has spoken to me and he has new things to say. I wonder how they handle that. Like, I wonder if that does happen and they just brush it under the rug
hmm,
because they don't like what they're hearing. But I like, I would want them to say, hey, you know what? We've got some great technology available to us to help us understand God better. Why don't we take this person with their claims and run them under a functional MRI and see if there's a almost like a radio in your head somewhere that you can tap into to speak to God and have God speak to you, you know, like
hmm.
have them try to understand that. And maybe they discover a way to talk to God. And maybe they discover that it's all in our heads, you know, or somewhere in
Or,
between. But
or yeah, or there's some completely new force. I mean, that's the whole idea of combining science and religion into something awesome. Um, yeah, that's a good point. I think we had, well, I'm not going to count Scientology as being a born out of a prophet. There was the Mormon religion with John Smith. It was 1800s, I think.
somewhere
And
around there, which was not all that dissimilar from Scientology, but in the way
uh,
it was born.
yeah, I mean, it's harder to analyze because there's less data there. So,
Yeah.
maybe it's different. Um, but that's a good point. Well, I think there's always people who do come out and say that they have connections to the other world, some sort of thing. But I think it's seen differently today. You have like Sylvia Brown, who claims that she can like see the future and is clairvoyant and all this stuff. And I think people don't take those things as seriously now because they're disillusioned. Honestly, like
Hmm.
it used to be back in the day, you could light a fire and people are like, whoa, wow, you're a miracle worker. And now you have to you, you have to do a lot to get people's attention.
Yeah.
And a lot of the times you see all these predictions that people have made that didn't come true over and over and over again. So repeated administrations of false claims of some kind of premonitions or something like that, I think turns people off of that.
Yeah.
And I think nowadays a lot of people just look at it in a sense of like, well, this is fun to do, kind of like the horoscopes in the newspaper. Everybody reads them and everybody looks at them, but they don't take it seriously. They know that it's bogus.
Most people do. Yeah.
Well, yeah. I mean, there's no. Well, yeah, that's a whole different
Yeah.
topic of conversation.
Even within the Bible, there were future predictions that were later proven false, like in the Bible. Like like
Yeah.
something in the Old Testament said that, like, in a couple hundred years something will happen, and then but New Testament rolls around, it didn't happen, and then they changed the date. And
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that just goes to show that, like, there's probably certain things that you know are total rubbish in there, of course, but um as long as you can parse out reality from fiction, good from bad, I don't think there's anything necessarily wrong with religion. I say that carefully, just because sometimes I feel like uh, depending on that too heavily, just because of the perceived ramifications of going against it, seem to weigh so heavily on many people. It can kind
Yeah,
of dissuade them from making good decisions sometimes, I think.
that's
You
true.
know, the whole fear of going to hell, basically.
Well, yeah, and a lot of people for religious reasons don't accept the products of science.
Yeah,
There's people who religiously um, don't believe in things like vaccines or modern medicine. Um,
evolution.
yeah, well, but I'm talking about like real things that actually matter here and now. Um, they people won't take medicines. They won't give their kids medicines because they believe that God doesn't believe in those things.
Yeah,
And I think science is demonstrably true, at least as far as we know it. And it's the truest truth we have today.
mm,
So I don't think there's anything wrong with, siding with that and going with what we know. Um, yeah, there was a time, yes, doctors said that smoking was good for you, or that drinking radium water was, healthy, invigorating kind of thing to do. But we've learned from that and we change. Unfortunately, I think religions tend to be stuck in that radium water phase,
yeah,
um, and that's to their detriment. Like, and I don't want to come across as like coming down on religious people, because I do see the value in it. Certainly from the humanitarian standpoint, like the the fact that people for religious reasons have done some great things, but they've done some awful things, and I think that's where you have to be able to question and challenge what you believe and go go the way that you think is right. Like, I don't know, that
yeah.
probably doesn't make any sense.
I think if you're religiously inclined, you should embrace science, because uh, a lot of people feel comfort from religion, right?
Yeah.
They feel a comfort from basically the safety net that is their chosen God. But when it comes to explaining everything and just saying, "Oh, it's just, God did it, snapped his fingers or whatever," um, there's something you're really lacking there. There's something you're really missing out on, and that's the uh, great mysteries of life that are just fascinating and inspiring to learn and know more. And when the great thing about science is we know almost nothing.
Yeah. And
But
actually, because of science, we know that we know almost nothing.
yeah,
Um,
but it's still fun, and
yeah.
it's still like exciting. Like if you like mystery movies, you'd probably really like science. Like, so
Well,
embrace
and
it.
yeah, and wouldn't the question I would pose to religious people is, wouldn't God want you to understand the world that God created? Like, isn't that the height of praise? Is understanding and knowing and marveling at the universe.
Yeah, see,
So
first damn book of the Bible goes into this whole apple from the tree of knowledge thing, and makes it like a sin to know things. And I'm like, what?
yeah, that's
That's
a that's a good point. Yeah.
like that's bad thinking right there. Like,
Yeah, exactly. Be ignorant and obey.
yeah,
And I think that's the first step in, being subjugated by someone.
yeah.
Um,
Blindly following your leaders is exactly why we have wars. You know, it,
exactly.
if people weren't trained to just do what they're told without questioning their morals or anything, which only takes like a third of a second. You can tell right
Hmm.
from wrong pretty damn fast, as fast as it takes for synapses to fire. You know, if we weren't brainwashing people to do that, the world would be a much better place.
Well, and yeah, exactly. Talking about wars, like go back to World War one of the most terrible, stupidest, pointlessest wars, if that's a word, we've ever had. But Christmas time, what was it, 1919 or something like that? The all the soldiers came out of the trenches and sung songs and exchanged alcohol and hung out together for a minute until their superiors saw what was going on, and they're like, nope, nope, get back into the trenches and start killing each other. But that's the thing, like, regular people want to get along. They don't want to fight. um, so that was, yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, I don't know. That's probably a good place to wrap up, I suppose, before we start getting into religion bashing too much.
Yeah. Exactly. Not that I would. I mean, well, I think the organization. I'll just end on this concept. Spirituality is good. It is definitely something that like being uh, being awestruck by the world and by something you can't explain is a good thing, as long as you use science to then try to understand it, because you're going to be even more awestruck when you know what mechanism makes it happen. um, but yeah, it's like,
And
I think,
spirituality and religion are not like the same thing at all.
no, and that's my point, is like as soon as you start trying to put it in boxes and give it names and categorize it and have a process, then it loses all of the marvelous features that made it something wonderful. Um, and such is God, or whatever, if you want to call it God or the force or some cosmic spiritual energy or something like that, whatever it is, it's going to be gone when you start trying to put it in boxes. And so that's the problem I have with religion, is it's taking art, something that's beautiful and unique and special, and trying to capitalize on it, trying to turn it into a commodity, trying to structure it, and that's the thing that I think people should be thinking about, whether you're religious or spiritual or atheist or scientific or all of the above. That's my monologue for the end.
Yeah, we should probably do a minute microscopy on spirituality versus religion. But
yeah.
So if you've got some monologues of your own, go ahead and leave them in the comments. And actually, don't do a thumbs down, do a thumbs up. But
yeah,
leave them in the comments there. And don't forget to hang out for the song on the way out, which eventually you can get the album on Amazon and iTunes, Spotify, all that good stuff.
Oh yeah, it's gonna be great. So check it out, you'll like it. It's gonna be epic and super spiritual. Have a good night, everybody.
No scars on my wrist today. No chemicals in my veins. No more will you hear me say that I wanna blow out my brains. There are stars shining in the sky, other worlds in my backyard. All of this makes me wonder why I ever thought life was hard. Blessed be the signs of pain, tragedy I've overcome. Mental scars in a state of bliss, a peace of mind I cannot see. If I never were where I'm today,